I've often wondered how good, decent people who care about their families, their communities, and the world at large, sometimes make what seems like really bad political choices. I mean, choices that just make me scratch my head and think, how could they support that candidate, or that policy, or that movement? It makes no sense at all, to me. But there's a lot of anger and hatred and disappointment out there. And there's more than a few politicians who are really good at fermenting and exploiting that, taking advantage of it for their own purposes. We've seen a lot of that recently and are likely going to see a lot more. So, let's make one thing clear. Good people voting for bad politicians isn't anything new, and is not unique to any one country or any one time period. It happens everywhere, all the time. And it's not just because people are stupid or evil. It's actually quite the opposite. It's because they're humans. They're emotional. They're influenced by the world around them, like all of us are, and like people have always been. Maybe it has more to do with the tendency to oversimplify the nature of good and evil. We seem to assume that good people will always make good choices, and that bad choices are only made by bad people. But it's a lot more complicated than that. And the truth is, human behavior in general, and when it comes to politics in specific, is messy. And our decision-making processes are influenced by an awful lot of different factors. So, why do people with good intentions align themselves with politicians who may not embody their values? Is it because they're misinformed about the politician's true intention? Is it because they're more concerned with their own personal interests than the greater good? Maybe it's a mix of both. But one thing's definitely for sure. It's not as simple as just labeling everybody as good or bad. People are complex, and their political beliefs are often rooted in a very deep sense of identity, community, and belonging. So, let's examine what we know about why people vote the way they do vote. First, let's start with emotions. We'd all like to think that we make our political choices based on fact and logic. But the truth is, most of us don't. Political campaigns capitalize on fear, hope, and anger to mobilize voters and often use emotional appeals to override our rational thinking. There are candidates who say, yeah, I'll bring back the good old days, and they may stir some longing for those simpler times. The reality is, those times may not have been as great as we remember them. Fear works the same way. Someone warns you that voting for their opponent could lead to disaster. That fear can override reason. We're down to survival instincts. After major events like terrorist attacks, or if the economy is in shambles, fear often drives voters towards simplistic policies that promise easy answers and security, even if they may be harmful in the long term. But voters want that. It's what they're looking for. There's something very deep-rooted in all of us, and that's the need to belong. Humans are social creatures. For thousands of years, being part of a group wasn't just a nice thing, it was a matter of survival. If you got cast out from your tribe, your chances of survival and making it on your own were pretty slim. So we evolved this drive to find our group and stick with it. Whether it's Canada versus the US, or red versus blue, or left versus right, or worker versus boss, or any other multitude of divisions, groups give us identity and belonging. They give us a sense of community. But here's the catch. Once we identify with a group, we'll often defend it, right or wrong, no matter what. Hey, you ever seen the sports rivalries? Look at the Toronto Maple Leafs. Even after 60 years of losing, look how passionate Toronto Maple Leaf fans can still be. This all creates what's called identity politics. A party, candidate, or policy may not align with our own values, but we might support it because our group does. Maybe your family's been voting for one party for generations. That's a powerful influence. You might not even think about why you're voting that way. It just feels like the right thing to do because it's what your tribe does. And stepping outside that, it can feel like you're betraying your people, and that's tough. Think about a small town where the majority of people all vote a certain way. You want to be the one different colored election sign on your lawn? That alienates you a lot. Or consider people who have deep religious feelings, and they find that their values align with a particular politician's platform, even if that politician has a questionable track record on other things. Political choices are often less about policies and more about belonging. People vote with their tribe. It's not just about who represents my values, but also who makes me feel like I belong and that I'm a part of all this. That brings us now to the us versus them mentality that's become so rampant in our society and really around the world. Sadly, it's become one of the biggest factors in who people vote for and who they support. It really comes down to fostering hate against other people who are different than you, who don't agree with your opinion. Dehumanize anyone who's not on your side. Politicians, governments, political parties, they all need to rally support behind their cause. And the easiest way to do that is to have an enemy. Identify a common enemy with the public, someone that you can fight against together. And if there isn't one, don't worry, you can create one. And politicians have become really adept at creating enemies and rallying the voters against them. They use greed, jealousy, envy, all kinds of motivations to get people on their side. It's become politics 101. These days, people don't just talk about policies anymore. They talk about the evil of the other side. You don't sit down and say, I've looked at that policy and it's not good for me, it's not good for my business, I'm not going to support that politician. You don't do that. Instead, you say, that guy's evil. He's a traitor. He should be in prison. They just extremes beyond anything you've ever seen before. Having an opinion different than the candidate of your choice means that that person must be a plant from the other party, brainwashed by mainstream media, a complete idiot who refuses to accept reality. No common sense at all. Here in Canada, people are crusading around holding up signs that say, F Trudeau. That's insane. You can disagree. I want to be able to come out here and make a video and say, look, this is why I'm voting for Justin Trudeau, or this is why I'm not. This is what I think of his policies, or this is what I disagree with his policies. I want to be able to talk about Pierre Poilievre and say, look, these aspects of his campaign, of his platform, are wrong. The minute you do that, you become the subject of hate, that you are one of the most evil people in the world who should be imprisoned. You're a traitor to the country. That's become the basis of voting. And to tell you the truth, that's sad and that's pathetic. And people out there, many of the people who are watching this, are involved in that and encouraging it. And we've got to stop that. We've got to stop that now. Our wonderfully complicated brains are full of funny little quirks called cognitive biases. These impact how we think and process information. For the first one, confirmational bias. This seeks out information that supports what we already believe and ignores anything that contradicts it. It's your brain's way of saying, you see, I told you I was right. And the internet makes this so much worse. Social media platforms and news algorithms feed us content individualized to our previous online behavior. So, of course, your friends and subscription lists are tailored to your wants. YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter feeds are probably filled with posts and articles from people who think just like you. So, everything around you is reinforcing what you already believe. So, when everyone around you agrees, it's pretty easy to feel like your side is right and the other side must be wrong. Yeah. It's your own personal echo chamber. Then we've got the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is where people overestimate their understanding of complex issues. They know just a little bit about a subject, but present themselves as experts, usually because they actually believe that they know way more than they really do. And this is pretty common in political discussions. The truth is, most people don't know a damn about the platforms, policies, or economic impacts of proposals by their favorite politicians, but they're ready and excited to condemn anybody who opposes them. These cognitive issues complicate and hamper our ability to make reasoned choices and can lead to bad decisions. In today's world, information is everywhere, but that also means that misinformation is everywhere. As we move away from traditional media sources, we've got to exercise extreme caution, care, and diligence, which not everyone is doing. Social media, websites, cable news networks, podcasts, content creators, influencers aren't just reporting the news or informing us about subjects anymore. They're shaping it, spinning it, and sometimes outright distorting it or even making it up. Internet algorithms show us and present content to us that we're likely to click on, not what's true. And the speed at which information spreads online is dizzying. And that means that false narratives can gain traction before they're ever debunked, confirmed, denied, or fact-checked by anybody. A sensational lie travels much faster than a boring truth. And the impact is even greater when prominent figures amplify that misinformation, giving it credibility in the eyes of their supporters. We've seen that happen more than a few times. Media literacy is another critical factor. A lot of people struggle to differentiate between credible news sources and those that have hidden agendas or unreliable reporting. Satirical sites, propaganda outlets, manipulated videos, and even AI-generated fake content are starting to blur the lines between reality and fiction. This lack of discernment really allows misinformation to flourish, and it divides communities and distorts the truth and public discourse. And don't forget about the role of profit in media. Outrage and controversy drive clicks, views, and advertising revenues. This creates a system where the most inflammatory stories rise to the top, regardless of their accuracy. In this kind of an environment, staying well-informed requires active effort on your part, seeking out diverse, reputable sources and questioning the motivations behind the content that we see. It's not easy. Here's another really important truth. Politics is complicated, really complicated. Policies have layers, issues have history, and the truth? Well, that's often messy. But we're busy people. Economics, healthcare, climate change, foreign affairs, taxes, these are massive, tangled problems. We don't have time to read every bill or analyze every candidate's platform or dig into the nuances of every issue. So what do? We simplify. Latch onto slogans, sound bites, or a single issue that we feel strongly about. Unfortunately, those summaries often oversimplify. They boil down complex issues into black and white choices, good versus bad, us versus them. And when you frame things that way, it's easy to miss the subtleties. It's easy to make a decision based on the simplified version of the story rather than the entire story and the truth. But politicians these days are more than happy to rely on these cheap slogans and short sound bites, whether on the campaign trail, debate stage, or when being interviewed. If they gave a full answer, they might either confuse voters or maybe even lose support. The rule is, don't give an answer. Lead them back to your talking point, no matter what the question was. That's how they get by these days. Look, take housing, for example. House prices are high and they're going higher all the time. Young people are saying, look, we can't afford a home. We're never going to be able to buy one. Rents are going sky high. What do we do? So Politician says, I'm going to go out there and make sure we lower the price of housing. These people are happy. Meanwhile, I'm listening in the background and I say, wait a minute, I own a home, like 2/3 of the population does. And that's my biggest investment. That's my savings, my life savings, my retirement plan. You're going to do something that's going to make that worth less, like 10, 20% cheaper? I'm not, wait, what are you talking about? Meanwhile, the young couple beside me saying, yeah, but we can't afford our rent. It's going sky high. Politician doesn't know how to answer it. Once again, he's got to juggle. He doesn't like that. So what's he do? He tries to rely on not answering questions, slogans, and sound bites. Leadership style plays a role in all this too. Some leaders just inspire trust and confidence, even if their policies might not be what you want and they're a little questionable. Other leaders might have great ideas, but lack the charisma and don't connect with voters. Then there are some leaders who manipulate, playing on fears and divisions to gain power. Or sometimes good people are drawn to strong personalities or big promises without fully examining what's behind them. I've never really understood that. Some people just want strong leaders. Personally, I don't want a strong leader. I want a good leader. And this machismo, he's got to be strong and stand up for our country. Never gone that way, but I know a lot of people do. And let's be honest, sometimes it feels like we're not voting for someone, but against someone else. Sometimes it's a lesser of two evils dilemma that's all too common. People are faced with two choices, neither one of which feels perfect, and they're forced to pick the one who they dislike the least. It's not a real recipe for enthusiasm, but it's something that voters have faced more than a few times. There are other circumstances where people just want a change. When one of the candidates is an incumbent, sometimes people just want them out of office. And that can be for a few reasons. Might be because people are dissatisfied with how they've handled themselves. Maybe there's been a scandal. But sometimes it's got nothing to do with their leadership. There are global events that can transpire that can make economies crash and things not work well. If you think back and look at the COVID pandemic, very few, actually I can't think of any, leaders of democracies have been reelected in elections since then. There were a lot of tough decisions to be made and a lot of real hardships were endured, and the government of the day has taken responsibility and gotten blamed for that. So there are times when people vote against someone and really don't care, who the opposition is. It's just time for a change. So how do we sum this all up? How can we make better choices and maybe help other people make better choices? Well, the first step is awareness. Understanding some of these forces, tribalism, confirmation bias, fear, oversimplification, can really help us to see when they're at play. Next, let's challenge ourselves. Step outside your bubble. Read articles from sources you don't normally agree with. Talk to people who see the world differently. And this one's important. Listen. Not to argue, not to prove a point, but to understand why people are thinking differently than you. Let's be okay with complexity. Let's accept that not every decision is going to be black and white. Sometimes we have to wrestle with the gray areas, but that's okay. That's how we grow. So the next time you see someone make a political choice that leaves you shaking your head, just remember, they're probably not a bad person. Like you and me, they're navigating a messy, complicated world. And at the end of the day, politics isn't about perfection. It's about progress. Good people are going to continue making bad political choices. It's inevitable. But if we approach the process with humility, curiosity, and a real willingness to listen, we can get a little bit closer to making choices that we can all be proud of. Thanks for watching. If this resonated with you, please share it with someone who might find it helpful. And let's keep the conversation going. See you next time. Thanks for spending this time with me today. I hope this gave you something to think about. If you enjoyed this conversation, hit the like button, share it with someone who might find it helpful, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Let's keep talking, learning, and understanding each other better. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.